boys and girls, it's Miss Bissell. We're starting the week out with lesson 8-1. This is the introductory lesson to our chapter on multiplying fractions and mixed numbers. We have worked hard before the break to add, subtract, and divide those fractions and mixed numbers. So now we're going to work on our last operation. So we are on page 457 in our book if you want to turn there. Actually, I'm going to start on page 458. So if you will start on page 458, if you need to pause me a minute to get there, that's fine. All right. The essential question that's going to guide us through this lesson is, what are some ways to multiply a whole number by a fraction? And we have the scenario where Joanne wants to make 6 batches of fruit punch. And the question she needs to answer is, how many cups of orange juice does she need? So she is thinking to herself that since I need 2/3 of a cup for each batch of punch, then I'm going to need to find the product of 6 times 2/3. So we're going to drop down here, and it looks like they're telling us it's one way, but actually they're showing us 2 ways. I see, first of all, models. So when I look at these models, I see 6 holes that are broken into 2/3. And if you count the yellow 2/3 in each hole, you notice that there are 12 thirds. And we'll talk about that improper fraction in a minute. All right, so that's modeling it, which isn't so bad in a situation like this. All right, and then she's going to talk about using repeated addition, and that's going on this line downward. So we have 6 times 2/3. So to find that product in using repeated addition, basically we just have 2/3 as an addend 6 times. So we're going to be multiplying the 2's 6 times. So this is where they get the numerator 6 times 2 over the denominator thirds. All right, and then you multiply the numerators together. That gives us 12, and we still are working with those thirds. All right, that brings us to the same product that we got with our models. And again, now we need to deal with that improper fraction. So if you remember, we always take the numerator, divide it by the denominator. We'll either get a mixed number or a whole number. 3 divides into 12 evenly 4 times, so we get a whole number in this situation. So it looks like Joanna is going to need 4 cups of orange juice to make 6 batches of that punch. All right. A third way is that we can use the associative property. So we can think of 2/3, this fraction, as basically 1/3 plus 1/3, or 2 times 1/3. So 2/3 multiplied by 6 would be the same thing as taking the product of 2 times 1/3 and multiplying that product times 6. Now, the associative property will make that easier because we can take the whole numbers and multiply those together. So we can move the parentheses around, and now we can move it around the 6 and the 2, find the product of the whole numbers, and multiply that times the 1/3. So we know 6 times 2 is 12, and then we multiply that times 1/3. So here we get the 12 thirds, and we get 4 cups. So Joanne needs 4 cups of OJ to make 6 batches of punch. All right, might be easier to see it if we work through a problem that does not already have the solution underneath it. So let's take a look at the convince me. So let's find 10 times 3/5, and let's use repeated addition to check our answer after we do a little bit of work with the associative property. So I'm not going to draw models for this. I don't think you guys are going to need them. I hate to have to draw 3/5 10 times. That's going to be a lot more drawing than what was done in the OJ problem. So let's start with the problem. 10 times 3/5. Okay. And we know that we can think about this as 10 times 3 times 1/5, right? The 3/5 we can think of as 3 times 1/5. Now, I'm going to move those parentheses, and by using the associative property, I can now multiply those whole numbers together and then multiply that times 1/5, okay? So we know that 10 times 3 is 30, and 30 times 1/5 is what I now have, okay? So what I get is 30 times 1/5 would be 30/5. That improper fraction needs to be converted to a mixed number or a whole number. Let's see what happens when we divide that numerator by the denominator. 5 goes into 30 6 times even. So I get the answer 6. All right, now we're going to check it with repeated addition. So I have 10 times 3/5 as my problem. So I need to add 3/5 10 times. All right. 3 10 times is 30. And I'm working with fifths. So there it is. I have 30/5. So I already know that's going to be 6. And that's going to check my problem as correct. All right. Give you a minute to pause it if you need to go back and think about that a minute. If not, let's go ahead and let's flip over to page 459. On page 459. All right. So Micah wants to use Joanne's recipe to make 9 batches of the punch. How many cups of orange juice does he need? All right, so he's going to make 9 batches. And if I remember correctly, we need 2/3 a cup of OJ for every batch. So I get 9 times 2/3. All right. So I could think of this as 9 times, and then I know that 2/3 would be obtained by multiplying 2 times 1/3. All right. I can use that associative property to rewrite it and multiply those whole numbers together first. All right, and that's going to give me 18. 9 times 2 is 18 times 1/3. 1/3 18 times is going to be 18/3. There's that improper fraction. That improper fraction, I need to divide the numerator by the denominator. 3 goes into 18 6 times even. So we're going to need 6 cups of OJ to make 9 batches of the punch. All right. Number 2 asks us to explain why 8 times 3/4 is the same as adding 3/4 to itself 8 times. Well, I think that's because multiplication, very simply, can be represented as repeated addition. All right, so let's just write that. Multiplication can be represented as repeated addition. And that doesn't change. We know that from whole numbers. We know that from decimals. Now we know it with fractions, okay? So multiplication can be represented as repeated addition. All right, so now here's some models. All right, so we're going to find the product, and we're going to actually shade the models to help, just to get some practice with this. So we have 3 wholes times 2/3. We're looking for the product of 3 times 2/3. So we need to shade 2 of each whole to represent 2/3. And I see 2, 4, 6 are shaded. So that gives me 6/3. Improper fraction. We don't want to leave an improper fraction. The denominator 3 divides into the numerator 6 evenly 2 times. So our answer is going to be 2. All right, let's look at the next example. We're looking for the product of 2 times 3/5. So we have 2 models broken into fifths. So we need to shade 3 of each of these models. All right, and that I see I have 6 fifths shaded. All right, improper fraction. I know that 5 goes into 6 one time. 1 would be left over, and I'm working with fifths, so 1 1/5 would be the product of 2 times 3/5. All right, boys and girls, let's do a little bit of practice. Number 5, they want us to complete each equation to find the product. It's quite obvious they're wanting us to do some repeated addition. So if we're finding the product of 6 3/4, then that means we have 3/4 as an add-in 6 times. They've got the boxes here for us. Okay, so I have 6 times 3, and I know that because I have 3 represented 6 times, and the denominator is the 4. 6 times 3 is 18 fourths, so I'm looking good because that's what I should have. Now that is an improper fraction, so we might want to go out to the side and divide 4 into 18. If you're really good with your times tables, you know that that is going to go 4 times. 4 times 4 is 16. When we subtract, we get a numerator of 2 fourths, and we know that 4 2/4 simplifies by 2. So that's going to give us 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So 4 2/4 equals 4.5. So simplified, we get 4.5. All right. Now let's look at number 6. We have the product of 16 3/8. So I'm looking to see with the boxes what they're asking me to do here. So here I believe they want us to use the associative property because they've got the first factor already written for us, and then they're multiplying something times 1/8. Well, I think what they're doing is they're saying that we arrive at 3/8 by multiplying 1/8 3 times. So we're going to use that. And then that's going to give me 48. 16 times 3 is 48 1/8. So they're multiplying those whole numbers first. All right. So that's going to give me 48 eighths. All right. And 8 goes into 48. It's going to go 6 times evenly. And I know that because 6 times 8 is 48. All right, I could go out and divide if I have to. Knowing your times tables is very helpful here. All right, number 7 looks like they're wanting me to find the product of 500 2/5. And I see that they're wanting me to multiply something times 2 and something times 1/5. So I think, again, they're using that little associative property. They're wanting me to take the whole number 500. The 2/5 we get from multiplying 2 times 1/5. So that's what they're doing here. All right, so here they're wanting me to say that 500 times 2 is going to give me 1,000. 1,000 times 1/5 would give me 1,000 fifths. And 5 goes into 1,000 200 times. I can use my knowledge that 5 goes into 10 2 times, and then I annex those 2 zeros. Do a little bit of those mental math skills that we worked on earlier this year. All right. Now, I'm going to show you another way. So we've looked at models. We've looked at repeated addition. We've looked at using the associative property. But the next way that we can look at it is probably the shortest, quickest way ever. And it's probably the way your mom and dad learned how to multiply fractions. It's certainly the way that I learned how to multiply them. So let's just go back to number 5. And let's look at 6 times 3/4. All right. now that you understand what we're doing, do you recognize that we could actually make 6 a fraction by putting it over 1, keep the fraction 3/4, okay? And what we get when we multiply the numerators together is 18, and what we get when we multiply the denominators together is 4. And the beauty of fractions multiplication is that you do not have to have like fractions, because you can multiply the numerator times the numerator, denominator times the denominator, and not worry about having like equivalent fractions. So here we go. 18/4, we already talked about that one, came out to be 4 times 1/2, 4.5. We'll call this the shortcut method. So let's look at that with number 6. So we had 16 times 3/8. So remember, with the shortcut, we need to have 2 fractions to multiply together. We can make this factor, this whole number, a fraction by putting it over 1. Its value is still going to be 16. Multiply it by 3/8. All right, we know that 16 times 3 is 48, 48 eighths. 8 goes into 48, 6 times even, and that's what we got here. All right, and let's just practice the shortcut method here. So we have 500 times 2/5. So think about it. We've got to make 500 a fraction. We would do that by putting it over 1 times 2/5. I get 1,000 fifths. When I divide it out, that gives me 200. Okay? So there you go. Let's sum it up. We've looked at models. We've looked at repeated addition. We've looked at using the associative property. And I showed you this 4th method, the shortcut. So I'll let you think about which one you understand the best and which one you want to use. And you're going to use those in a few of these fraction practice problems at the bottom of the page. I think I'm good with just using the shortcut method. So for number 8, I would be taking 35, placing it over 1, making it a fraction, times 2/5. Okay. 35 times 2 is 70 fifths. And if you go out to the side on a scratch sheet of paper and divide that out, 5 goes into 70, 14 times even. And there's my answer. Number 9, same thing. We can put the 7 over the 1. We can multiply it times 5/12. When I multiply the numerators, I get 35. When I multiply the denominators, I get 12. That improper fraction converts. 12 goes into 35 2 times. 2 times 12 is 24. So that gives me 11 left over. And I'm working with 12s. And again, out to the side, you can divide that. Don't forget, when you divide, your remainder becomes the numerator. The divisor that started out as the denominator stays the denominator. We're not changing the divisor unless we have to simplify our answer. All right, number 10, we've got 9 over 1 times 2/3. 9 times 2 is 18. 1 times 3 is 3. I know 3 goes into 18 6 times, because 6 times 3 is 18. Okay. If I'm moving too fast for you, pause it. You've got the option to do that on any video, and you can think about it, rework it yourself. If you want to use another method, you're welcome to do that. All right, number 11, we have 300. We're going to make that a fraction by placing it over 1, and we're going to multiply it times 1/2. Numerators multiply together give me 300. Denominators multiply together give me 2. And I know that 2 goes into 300 150 times. You can use your shortcut math. You know 2 goes into 30 15, and you annex that 0. So that mental math we worked on earlier this year is helpful right now. All right. Let's look at the next one. We have 64 times 3/8. So we're going to take that 64, put it over 1 to make a fraction, multiply it times 3/8. Out to the side, I've got to see what 64 times 3 is. I get 192 eighths. And when I divide it, 8 goes into 192. I'm using scratch paper out to the side. Sorry you can't see me. I get 24. Even. Number 13, 900 over 1 times 2/3. All right, I know 2 times 9 is 18, and next those 2 zeros, so I get 1800 thirds. This one's easy to mentally multiply. 3 goes into 18 6 times. Whoops. And then I've got those 2 zeros to annex, so I get an answer of 600. So 2/3 of 900 is 600. Number 14, we're going to put 84 over 1 and multiply it times 1/4. Get 84 fourths. Go out to the side. Actually, this one I can do mentally. 4 goes into 8 2 times, even, and 4 goes into itself once. So I get 21 as my product. All right, and the last one, we're going to do 42 over 1 to make it a fraction times 2/7. 42 2 times is 84. I get 84 sevenths, and 7 goes into 84 12 times if you know your 12 tables. All right. There it is. 4 different methods to multiply fractions. So you can use drawing the models and counting your parts to find the product. You can use repeated addition. I don't think I want to take 42/7 42 times and have to add that together, so that may not work on some of them. You can use that associative property and regroup to make it easier, or you can use this shortcut method where you make the whole number a fraction and multiply it times your fraction. So you decide what works best for you. I have written in your email today what problems each group is going to do. In lieu of the problems, if you're in block 1 or block 2 but not on contract, you guys can go to Google Classroom and you can do the practice buddy for lesson 8.1. I have that posted for today. You can do that instead of the book work, or you can do the book work. The choice is yours. I think some of you might like the practice buddy. That comes through the Pearson platform online. I just imported it into Google Classroom. You will see it listed on the classwork page. If you scroll down your assignments, okay, at the top of the page before you start getting into the individual lessons. All right, boys and girls, have a great time with this. We will video chat in a little bit. Check the time for your group. Come in and video chat with me. Again, your information to video chat is also in your morning email from me. All right. I will talk to you folks soon.